It's conventional to introduce Bleak House in relation to the Great Exhibition, which took place in London in 1851, the year before Bleak House was published and while Dickens was writing the novel. Charles Dickens covered the Great Exhibition as a journalist, and briefly he had been involved in a planning committee, but he dropped out when he realised how tenuous his involvement would be. Housed in a purpose-built structure called the Crystal Palace, the Great Exhibition was a celebration of the age intended to inspire productivity. There were more than 100,000 exhibits, seen by more than 6 million visitors. The displays included machinery and artworks, carpets, stuffed animals, musical instruments and tools, weapons, and even entire houses which had been put up in the exhibition space. The Great Exhibition had been the brainchild of Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. Originally, he'd intended the event to be international in scope, but it inclined towards the achievements of the British Empire, things made in Britain or taken to Britain as the imperial centre. Dickens found the Great Exhibition overwhelming. In a letter, he complained of feeling used up by the baffling variety and extent of its exhibits. But at the same time, there's evidence in Bleak House that Dickens was crucially inspired by what he saw at Crystal Palace. Critics tend to agree that Bleak House is, to use a phrase taken from another Victorian writer, Thomas Carlyle, a condition of England novel, and I'm going to steer this back towards the Great Exhibition. In 1850, the year in which he was briefly involved in the planning committee, Dickens wrote an essay in which the speaker imagines organising an antithetical or opposing sort of exhibition about the state of England. I quote, "Which of my children shall behold the princes, prelates, nobles, merchants of England equally united for another exhibition, for a great display of England's sins and negligences, this dark exhibition of the bad results of our doings? Where shall we hold it? When shall we open it?" Bleak House is that exhibition. It displays what a character in the novel, Mr. Gridley, who is another victim of never-ending legal processes, calls the system. And he uses that term immediately in reference to protracted legal processes, but he also uses it more generally in the way we would use it nowadays. By the system, he means onerous bureaucracy, a world in which the odds are stacked against us. Really, Dickens portrays a kind of parasitism in the system. And comparably, later in the century, we could see Bram Stoker finding a very different way to represent it in Dracula. Bleak House displays poverty, injustice, hypocrisy, but also love, true charity, and acts of atonement. Sometimes Bleak House preaches at us, which you'll find particularly in some of the social commentary of the third-person narrator. But most often it simply displays for us to judge. In that strategy, you might compare a later novel of the 19th century, Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, which is subtitled "A Pure Woman Faithfully Presented," presented to us or displayed for us, leaving us to judge or evaluate the characters and what happens in the book. If Charles Dickens was overwhelmed by the Great Exhibition, we might feel the same way about the sheer number of characters and storylines in Bleak House. But like a visitor to a huge exhibition, we must find our way amidst the variety, deciding where to focus our attention in the two narratives. So we could see the Great Exhibition as an unhappy kind of inspiration for Dickens. He complained of its too muchness, but in that very quality, he found a strategy from which he could attempt a comprehensive vision of England in Bleak House.